Hello once again, everyone. My name is Erik Sprowls, and I was the series creator and director of Frightening Fridays. And this is the next chapter in our series of ongoing commentaries on how we brought the television series to life. The show starring the number one horror host in his own mind, the Creepy Reaper. And for the next half hour or so, I'm going to provide you with an alternate track of how we brought the show to life. So sit back, grab your popcorn, and here we go. This episode was entitled The Wedding, and it was the 7th episode in our series, our short-lived series, that is. And it was a lot of fun on many levels. This was, I guess this was following in our mythology of episodes. It wasn't a standalone, but it was following along a plot line that had taken place over the last 2 episodes. And
moving out of my castle, I'm going to put a lot of changes in place.
It concerns Cedric's new fiancée that he met mysteriously, and all of a sudden he's now marrying, and it kind of delves into the eventual surprise about her and where she's from and what she's up to and some of the things that she's secreted around the castle. Obviously, she has her own agenda. It's kind of funny to see a phone sitting in the castle there. In fact, I told... and that hoagie actually was Cedric's lunch, Ben Willis's lunch for real. The phone, we were going to have some kind of gothic-looking phone to kind of go along with the architecture of the castle. And I said, you know, it'd be even funnier and easier. Let's just stick a normal phone there. So we took the phone out of the control room. I'm not even sure. I don't even think it's plugged in, which is kind of funny. And then we go over the oldest trick in the book, the oldest joke in the book, all the way back to Abbott and Costello that I know of, where you're calling somebody on the phone and they walk up behind you, and he's calling Igor. And of course, you know, he turns around and says, "Be quiet, I'm trying to reach Igor." It was kind of funny how we did it.
What do you want? Leave me alone, Igor. I'm trying to call.
You know, we always talked about some of the episodes and such, but we never really talked about the movies and the background itself.
Where's my movie?
This is a horror host show, obviously, and it's a philosophy that started way back in the 50s, I guess, hosting horror movies, schlocky horror movies every Friday and Saturday night, Friday or Saturday night. And me being from the Pittsburgh area, a native of the Pittsburgh area, you know, that's my hero out there in the horror host area was Chilly Billy Cardilli, I guess, who hosted Chiller Theater. His name was Bill Cardill, and they had a Chiller Theater, I think, in New Jersey or New York, one or the other on WPIX, and this one, and his was on WPXI, so it's easy to get a little misconstrued, but he was one of the originals. And wait 5 minutes, I have to torture you first. Now, Creepy has constructed this device, and you can see it around Igor's neck. It's a collar, and all it really is silver tinfoil wrapped around his neck. But Mike actually came up with the idea because this was our 7th episode, and it always started out where he'd welcome the show, and he'd go down to the video vault and get this week's movie, and you know, and host it, you know, but he says, I'm tired of going down to the video vault. You know, that's a little boring. The first 10 minutes are just me basically walking downstairs. How about if I bring him up here? And I said, yeah, that's kind of cool. So he came up with this little retrieve option. And Joel is incredible in this. I mean, I don't know if you've ever done some headbanging. I've done a lot of headbanging in my time when I was younger, but watching Joe flop around like a fish out of water in this scene is kind of funny, you know. And he's a trooper for doing it. In fact, he lost Did he lose the collar? No. That's the movie he has in his hand. But he does it so hard that... And then at the end of it, he just flops to the ground. And that's not like he's falling on a cushion. He actually flops on cement. Blop! When it's all over. And it had to have hurt. And he does the frame by frame and the pause. Now, look at that. Joel, now he'll slow down a little bit, but he goes pretty good here for a while.
Yeah, little circle with another circle.
Is it a candy shop?
And I like how Gigi just kind of appeared from nowhere and just came in to distract him. They start talking about how he picked it up at Target. Joel's doing the robot. That's cool.
They do not. You smell.
You can see he's slowing down a little bit because that's rough. That's really rough. And I tell you what, I was a mascot for a minor league ball club, and doing that kind of stuff hurts after a while.
Somebody burning toast?
No.
Oh, jeez, Igor.
And he flung himself down on that ground too.
Neat little thing, isn't it?
I don't know what made me think of this, but if you look in the background up on the wall, you can see the curtains. I was looking at some old photographs of when we constructed this set. And what do they call those curtains in the background in castles? Some kind of tarps. I can't remember what they are off the top of my head, but all that is just nothing more than cloth stuffed with newspapers to give it some fluffiness. Valances? No. I can't remember what it is. Anyway, but those are just stuffed with newspaper. And I was looking at some of the old photographs when we put it together. It was kind of interesting to look back on it now and say, oh yeah, we did that. You can see Mike was having some fun here. He started to finally get the feel of doing creepy. And, he's flinging himself around, being more maniacal. It's fun for him to do. And here you got the Axe Files. And this is a long open. I mean, the movie hasn't even started yet. We're 10 minutes along here, and the movie hasn't even started yet. And we're wrapping up the cliffhanger from the last episode of Gwen sticking to what the audience is led to believe is a ticking bomb underneath their desk. And if you look in the background, you can see Mahler's collection of Creepy Reaper evidence that we used in prior episodes. The dunce cap from episode 4 that was on Damien, and the painting that Creepy had, and the Bob Ross parody in episode 5. Even the stick of dynamite from episode 4 that Igor used to light and tried to blow up Damien. It's all there, and we have it as evidence. But it's really just junk that we didn't know what to do with. We needed a place to store it, so we stored it in this back room. And there's the axe from the set too. If you look, that's the same briefcase or the same suitcase that Cedric uses when he goes on vacation way back in like episode 3, I think.
It's an alarm clock.
And a lot of people didn't understand this storyline, why there's an alarm clock and not a bomb, obviously. Well, you can't use a bomb. We don't want to kill off the Axe Files characters. And Gwendolyn, you don't know what her agenda is. You know that Cedric met her mysteriously, and you think she's working for Creepy and Company, and then you think she's working... She says she's playing the Axe Files as well. And it's because we introduce a new villain later in this episode, in the finale, that kidnaps Agent Scully, actually, and he constructed the Gwen bot, or a series of Gwen bots we had planned to get close to Cedric, and you'll see how that's incorporated later. And this is part of BUTV. It's a storage area. And you can see on the shelves cameras and videotape and film equipment of different types and nature. And we tried to shoot this at angles so it looked like there was a storage area that no one could see, that she was walking back through the bookshelves, and so you can't really be seen. But all she did was just a wraparound. Then you can clearly see her if you walk in the front. And here you learn for the first time that she really is an android or a robot of some type. And that's just a police siren on her head. But it's supposed to be like a robot charger, she's charging her batteries, and you're sitting there going, what's this all about, and now you're starting to piece together who she is. She's not really a woman at all. And here we are 13 minutes into the show, and the movie would just now be starting. She's not a woman at all. She's in fact an android. And you're like, well, where did she come from? Who made her, and what's she doing here? And you'll see later, Abby, actually, of what her importance is into the show. It turns out that the new villain on the show constructed her to self-destruct and kill the Reaper, as you'll see in this episode when he and Cedric are in the same room together. And they happen to be together at Cedric's wedding. So that's the big finale, obviously. Ben was probably kicking himself here because he's told me so many times I have lost count that he'll put his hair back in between takes because it gets in the way and it's uncomfortable. But he always takes it out whenever he wants to be on screen. Now that's a joke. I got to tell you this. That joke with honeydew was put in as a running gag. It's only funny to Creepy. That's the funny part about it, because Cedric made the comment that Creepy said we should elope, and he said, well, we can't elope. And he says, oh, you honeydew. And he's making some kind of reference to it because he said cantaloupe instead of honeydew, and Creepy just thinks that's the funniest thing in the world. So if you ever watched the Family Guy cartoon, there was a cartoon where Peter Griffin on the show got into a fight with a guy in a chicken costume, and they fought it out for like 5-10 minutes on the show. And as a recurring gag later in the series, he runs into the same chicken guy, and they start fighting again for no reason. And the only way you'd get that joke is if you watched that particular episode when he was introduced. So we kind of introduced that little honeydew joke there, and we reprise it later in the series. We play it to death in this episode, and then we even bring it up, I think maybe a couple episodes down the pike. He just starts laughing, and he'll slap his leg and say, honeydew, that's a funny joke, And there's kind of a little comment he said about you got to work with what you got. And I tell you what, when you're making a show like this, and it really is, and I've said it 100 times, it really is community theater. You have no... Mike was in his glory in this episode. When you have no money, you have no budget. You work with what you got. And I like the fact that Creepy said, I'm introducing the most terrifying thing ever, the trio. And it's those three dorks. And of course, I don't even think Scully really turned on the lights there.
Gwendolyn, are you in here?
So she comes down to try to find Gwendolyn down where she works in her offices, and there's nobody there. I guess it's a night shift. No one's around. Again, this is the where you'd sign out of camera equipment and that kind of thing. Students would come in and take equipment out to do news stories and such. And I kind of shot this like with bookcases and long bookcases and just long areas where it kind of reminds you of like Raiders of the Lost Ark with boxes, and so you would kind of get lost back there in amongst it all of where you were going. Even though it's really an open area, I think it kind of works. If you don't know the layout of the room or the scope of the room itself, I think it kind of works. And of course she finds the robot charger, and she's looking up there over the camera lens because you'll see later that she decides to look at some surveillance videotape of the room and what happens with that charger. And it's kind of nice too, I think, for Scully and Mauler in this episode, because they're actually doing some real investigative work on Gwendolyn. They're doing a little background check on what her story is, and I guess you could call her a villain in the series. Not a major player like Selena in Sexy Saturday Nights or the Evil Reaper. There were nowhere in the League of the Evil Reaper that you'll see at the end of this episode. But I guess she's kind of a villain character. I mean, she has her own agenda, and she's just a pawn between, for the evil Reaper himself, and she's playing our heroes pretty well. Obviously, Cedric with the marriage, and Creepy with, claiming that she's one person, and she's really not. And I think Heather Sage, who played Gwendolyn, will tell you that this scene here was very difficult for her. It was... She has to, in a monologue, it really is a monologue, talk to herself so the audience understands what's going on. And that she has her own agenda, and she's playing both sides, so to speak. And you're like, well, what's all this about? And why is she a robot? And what's she from? Where's she from? And I know she was very uncomfortable because she did this several times, and she'd either forget the lines or wouldn't perform it real well. And I know she was very frustrated, and the crew was frustrated. So we kind of took what we had. And in retrospect, I probably should have saved her all the grief and the agony and had it done as a voiceover where she was thinking to herself. And she could have read it right off the script and reacted off that live here in the scene. And we, of course, had to set it up so she would have to charge up. Her batteries were almost dead. But because the wedding date was almost here and all the evil villains, the evil Reaper understands she's going to be alone in the castle during the wedding with Cedric and Creepy. It would be the best time to destroy them both, so she's giving herself a big power charge to self-destruct. Now, this hallway is kind of interesting. It's right outside BUTV and the studios themselves. In fact, the door behind Mahler there is the entrance to the control room where we would shoot the show. And you can see there's a long shot in the hallway right there. If you look on the right on the wall, the on-air light is up there next to the door. And it's not something you really question, but you see it nonetheless when it's pointed out to you. You're like, oh, I see. So that's right outside the studio. That AC phase shifter is a real thing used in electrical engineering. Matt Colosimo came up with the idea. He just thought of that technical name. And if you see that little nose pin thing in her nose, that little diamond or whatnot, I think in retrospect, we didn't really care because it was community theater, and we're like, who really cares? But in retrospect, I think I probably should have asked her to take that out. It looked kind of silly, but we really didn't put enough. It's not like we were, this was just a fun show for them to learn television. This is one of my favorite scenes too in the series because it reminded me of the old Get Smart TV sitcom with Don Adams that was on in the 60s. I saw it in reruns years later, but your hero is basically has the answers to every problem he's ever confronted right in front of him, but he's so dim-witted he doesn't know it's right there. And he's kind of saying, hey, there's something different about you. It's like, hell yeah, she's got a big red freaking light on her head, charging up. And she's telling you, I am a Gwen bot. And he's like, no, that's not it. That just makes me laugh. That's a classic scene. Now, Ben Willis said he was confused later in the series, or later in this episode, why she was malfunctioning at the wedding. And I said, it's not she was malfunctioning. If you listen to that scene right there at the end, it said that there was a build-up to detonation was imminent. The self-destruct was activated. And, she's charging herself up with the power for a big explosion. And now she just has to wait for a time where Cedric and Spooky are together in the same room, which, of course, is the wedding. And he said, well, why is it when they're at the wedding that, you'll see her, looks like she's malfunctioning? And I said, it's not malfunctioning. There's just a surge of power that's so strong that she's going to explode. And that's exactly what she ends up doing at the wedding. You have the alternate track that has Ben and Heather's commentary on this. And I'm sure that they would probably provide you with better insight than I could. But I think, in my opinion, they didn't really have any chemistry. Can you guess? Not that the role itself really required a lot of chemistry. I guess you didn't want to have too much chemistry because you'd really feel bad for Cedric after Gwen bites it. But, you know, I just didn't think they had any to act off of. Oh, well, it's not that important. This is the outside of the McCormick building, where BUTV and the communication department's housed on Bloomsburg campus. And I like how they're on the it's supposed to be the FBI grounds, and Gigi brought her feather duster. First of all, they never get this close to the building dressed like that. A French maid, a drug user, and a guy in rags is what it looks like, and they're all running around. She's got a feather duster out. They wouldn't even get on the grounds, much less the building. Now, this room they've snuck into, we've used several times on the show. It's going to be the Evil Reaper's lair soon enough, because it looks like a warehouse. Right now, it's Agent Mahler's offices down there. In fact, that ladder behind them, Scully uses to escape from the Evil Reaper in an upcoming episode. Now, here's a good blooper. She's pulling on the door. That was not acting. That was all Leah Wagenblot. And I remember her telling me afterwards, because she's pulling on the door, and she didn't know you had to push. I was like, ugh, what typecasting. Now, it's funny because Agent Scully's down the hall one way and Agent Mahler's down the hall the other way. And the reason we shot it that way is neither one of them could be there that day at the same time. And we shot it at different angles, and it looks like, of course, Scully's carrying on a conversation down the hallway with someone, and Agent Mahler's down the hall doing something himself. And
look, Mahler, right there in the corner. You see that?
I thought that was kind of crafty how we shot it. Crafty, haha. Christina's last name. So, of course, their investigation is continuing here, and they really get to be a little bit of investigative FBI guys. They're looking at security video of Gwendolyn using the robot charger.
Does this mean what I think it means?
And
Gwen's a robot.
Mahler makes the big dun-dun-dun discovery. But, of course, we had to separate these two because at the end of this episode, we wanted to start ending episodes with big cliffhangers. Even if it falls in the mythology of the show, even if we do a standalone. And we needed to separate them because this is obviously the episode where Agent Scully gets kidnapped by our menacing villain that we're about to introduce, who as of yet is still unseen. You only know about his existence because of Gwendolyn. And you're not even sure that that's his doing either.
There's something that's been bothering me about her that I just can't put my finger on.
What would that be, sir?
I don't know. She just...
Again, here's another Don Adams moment.
Oh, I know what you mean.
From Get Smart. You know, he's like, yeah, something about Gwendolyn. She's get a real charge out of her. Yeah.
The girls, she's such an electric personality, the way her eyes glow.
You know, it's interesting to note here, in the last episode, episode 6, you saw Cedric and Damien sitting around a table with photo albums deciding on guest lists and stuff like that for the wedding. For this huge invite list, you had the Frankensteins and the werewolves and all those guys. And then it turns out we have this small wedding and none of that was even really needed. You know, how do you decorate a set like that for a wedding? I mean, you really think about, well, what the hell do you put up? I mean, you got this castle, you don't want to ruin anything, and you got webs everywhere. It's like, what do you put up for a wedding? You know? So somebody had the idea, you put up some crepe paper, I guess, you know, party streamers and a couple of plants to make it look like, you know, a wedding, I guess. And it doesn't really look anything like a wedding. But I guess, you know, it's close as we can get it. Here's that honeydew joke.
Honeydew?
How lame. And we put some plants on the set, you know, and some crepe paper and covered his throne up in white. And see, there's where she's kind of got those layers of electricity shooting up because she's ready to blow. And Cedric, or Ben, thought it was she was malfunctioning. I was like, no, that's not it at all. She's about to explode and self-destruct. And of course, now Count Numbskull is performing the ceremony. And I like Count Numbskull. I don't care what Mike DeShane says. He's like, I'm glad we lost that thing. He got to be annoying. I'm like, I like him. He's just like any other cast member. He just doesn't move.
I do.
And, of course, they're exchanging their vows. And Heather had a lot of dress changes. She had the witch's outfit, the 2 outfits at Haxfile's headquarters, this one. Of course, they don't have any chemistry at all. I gotta say it. They're just horrible. They got no chemistry at all, and I guess it's just as well. But you can tell that Heather doesn't even really want to be there. It's like she's really marrying Ben. I wanted to play a joke on him and say, well, you know, you're really married because technically, when you're married, you're married by a department store dummy. You are married in Pennsylvania. And of course, there's pieces of her landing from the explosion. All the times for the fog machine not to work. And of course, Cedric, or Ben, did his own makeup here. He wanted to have his hair all whacked out and covered in blackface and from the explosion.
She was a robot.
And there's the classic Maxwell Smart. He finally gets it after it's too late. I like how Count Numbskull pronounces them Cedric and Pile of Ash. It's not Cedric and wife. It's not Cedric and a pile of ash. It's just Cedric and Pile of Ash. Like Pile of Ash is her name. Like Dances with Wolves, I guess. Oh, that's cute. So this conversation here in this segment is extremely important because it brings everybody up to date. Because they're trying to figure out what Cedric or what Gwendolyn was. Why was she a robot? Why did she target Cedric to bring back to the castle as a fiance of all things? And what was that all about, you know? And Creepy starts to do the math that, well, if the X-Files weren't responsible and she wasn't government issue and they wasn't anything they knew of, well, who is it? Who's this new player that's coming on the scene that... And again, as an audience member, you haven't even seen the new player. You don't even know that there is one. They're just trying to do the math and trying to justify what happened with the Gwen bot. And so Creepy is just basically interrogating Cedric for everything that's gone on here. And this is Joe DeMola. It's funny, when we wrote this, we always had script sessions. The name of the character was just Crazy Lab Kid, but Mike took it literally.
Crazy Lab Kid.
You see there, he just calls him Crazy Lab Kid. And it's his technician who's working on what caused the explosion and what happened. And Joe plays this really well. He reminds me of some kind of Star Wars geek who's sitting in front of a computer who's working technical support for some computer company who has no answers. I mean, I tell you what, I've called technical support before about my computer or whatnot, and I've said, hey, can you help me out? And they're like, oh, yes, is your computer on? I'm like, yeah. It's like they start from the very basics, like, well, no duh. And his answers are, you know, well, I know what the problem is. What? And, you know, she's dead. She blew up. Well, no kidding. He also played, in the last episode, the singing telegram guy that delivers the letter to Cedric at the door. And he also plays the main stooge for the Evil Reaper in future episodes. Joe actually created the BUTV website at the time and was had a huge hand in monitoring a lot of the stuff that went on as far as Frightening Fridays.
means that
And so you can look at the set. There's crepe paper everywhere. There's plants. But I'm like, but how do you really decor that set for a wedding? They just couldn't really think of any way. So we just kind of threw some stuff on there, and
where did she come from?
you know, it's supposed the bomb took out half the castle anyway. So here's the funny thing about this scene. First of all, it's funny to believe that these three idiots are in FBI headquarters to begin with, but now they're making a phone call from a stairwell, and no one catches them.
It's in your butt. It's in your butt.
And Mike loved the joke of how the phone was disconnected, and I was like, okay, we'll just let it run. That reminds me of Robot Chicken right there. Just how, like, the way I directed it, how it had the close-up of her, and after she explained it, they both come in at the same time. You hear that little whoosh sound effect. I don't know why. It just does. Just dumb stuff like
I
that.
don't care what it takes. You must bring me Agent Scully. We may not be able to destroy.
So now, Creepy is setting this up, so he wants some answers about this whole Gwen bot explosion thing, and he tells him to kidnap Scully. And this was a mythology episode. This was part of our continuing mythology. I think the episode after this and the one after that were standalones. Sexy Saturday Nights and the musical. And we kept it that way because you know, the mythology is good, it's nice and all, but I finally start to understand why it was difficult for the X-Files. You know, they'd have a mythological episode, and then they'd have a couple of standalones, and you hated the standalones because I wanted to see what the plot was with the other, but it was so fun having standalones. Just different plots and different sets and different... I think our best episodes on this show were standalone episodes. The format change and Sexy Saturday Nights, the musical. And Mike finally learned how to play the camera a lot. He'd come up like right into the lens, you know, with his hands above his head and going creepy this and creepy that. And now this is outside McCormick too, and this is a nice little ad lib that Gigi did that I didn't know she was doing at the time. It was perfect. Looking through the wrong end. That's so typical.
That's probably them now.
And of course,
Hello.
they call back. They're getting ready to kidnap Agent Scully, and because this is where she exits the building every day, and they're ready to kidnap her. And as you see her coming out there, she stops at a car that, you know, her character's supposed to be her car, and it actually belonged to our technical director on the show at the time, Jody Reichert. And she walks to the back there. Those are my real car keys. And thus we introduce our new villain.
What the hell?
And that's something you can't ever get in community theater. It's line of sight. Their eyes keep darting from subjects in the background back and forth instead of focusing on whatever it was exactly. And you see how that would... They're getting better with this kind of thing as the series went on, but it could be a headache. So that's the introduction of our new villain, and he stays with us now until the end of the series. And that was episode 7, The Wedding of Frightening Fridays. Hope you've enjoyed this little commentary. If you had any kind of ideas of seeing how it was put together. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention, Hollis Higgins also did the that off-key wedding march that was kind of cryptical and kind of gothic. I thought he did a wonderful job with that. Incredibly Strange Filmmworks, which is the site that gave us all of our movies on the show. And there you go, episode 7 in a nutshell. And of course, I'll be back on episode 8 for Sexy Saturday Nights. But until then, bad luck and worst wishes. This is Erik Sprowls, and I'm out.